Sham Sharadava Nalalida Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Sham Sharadava Nalalidha Loka Tranaya Karuna Gana Ganatam Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Charanaravrindam Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Mahaprabhu ki Tana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Manasura Sena Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Vaditra Madhyam Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Romanchakam Pasru Taranga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Vigrara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanema Niramajanado Shri Vigrara Dana Nityanana Shingaratanema Juktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatapi Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Juktasya Bhaktamsa Niyunjatapi Vande Guru Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Hari Bhakta Sangha Chaturvidha Shri Bhagavat Prasada Satana Triptan Kritvaiva Tripten Bhajata Sadeva Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Kritvaiva Tripten Bhajata Sadeva Vande Guru Shiradhikama Bhavayara Para Madhura Lila Gunarupa Namna Shiradhikama Bhavayara Para Madhura Lila Gunarupa Namna Pratikshana Swa Kanalalupasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Pratikshana Kanalalupasya Vande Guru Ne Kunja Yuno Ratikeli Siddhai Jayali Bhiri Yuktir Apekshaniya Ne Kunja Yuno Tatratidaksha Ativalabhasya Vande Guru Shri Charanaravrindam Tatratidaksha Ativalabhasya Vande Guru Shri साक्षाद्धरितेन समस्तशास्त्रे उक्तास्तथा भाव्यतैव सदवे किन्तु प्रभोर्ज प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुराश्री चरणरविन्दम् यस्या प्रसादा भगवत् प्रसादा यस्या प्रसादं नगति कुतपि यस्या प्रसादा भगवत् प्रसादा यस्या प्रसादं नगति कुतपि ध्यायां स्तुवां तस्य यशस्तिं सन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरुश्री चरणरविन्दं ध्यायां स्तुवां तस्य यशस्तिं सन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरु ध्यायां स्तुवां तस्य यशस्तिं सन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरुश्री चरणरविन्दं ध्यायां यशस्तिं सन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरुश्री चरणं नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदान्त स्वामिन् इति नामिने नमः विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदान्त स्वामिन् इति नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादिशतारिणे नमस्ते गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादिशता जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hari Yadaye Nama Krishna Jadavaye Nama Jadavaye Madhavaye Kesavaye Nama Gopal Govinda Ram Shri Madhusudan Gopal Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan Shri Chaitanya Nityananda Shri Advaita Sita Hari Guru Vaishnava Bhagavata Gita Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raguna Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raguna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Haribo. Shri Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav Radhe. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladev, Jaya Subhadrama, Jaya Sudarshan Chakra. Jaya Sitaram, Jaya Lakshman Hanuman. Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Haribo, 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 Nitai Gaur Pramanande, Haribo. Jaya Vishnu Prabha, Paramahansa Prabha, Jakacharya Suttara Sarasi Shrimad, ISKCON Pratishtha Bhiviti Samsapakachar Vaishnava Saramani Gaura Priyajana Krishna Prema Bhakti Datta Patita Pavana is divine grace Abhacharvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shri Prabhupada Ji Ki Jai Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patiti Udhari Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatana Bhakti Raghunatha Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sat Goswami Prabhu Ki Jai Namacharya Shila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai Jayananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवसरि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय जय परम दयाल श्री नित्यानंद प्रभु की जय प्रेम नाम संकीर्तने जनक प्रेम पुरुषोत्तम श्री सच्चिदानंद श्रीमान गौरंग श्री चैतन्य महाप्रभु गौर हरि महावरणावतार की जय गोलोकेर प्रमधान हरिनाम संकीर्तन जय की जय जुग धर्म हरे कृष्ण महामंत्र की जय बृहद मृदंग ट्रांसलेंट भक्ति श्री सेवा की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपना राधा कुंद श्याम कुंद गिरिराज गोवर्धन की जय श्री ब्रज वृंदावन मथुरधाम की जय दैलोश्यप श्री श्री राधा नील माधव की जय श्री श्री मायापुर नवद्वीप एक चक्रधाम की जय परम करुण श्री श्री गौर निताय की जय श्री पुरुषोत्तम कित्र जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की जय श्री जगन्नाथ स्वामी बलदेव प्रभु स्मृति सुभद्रा देव सुदर्शन चक्र भगवान की जय भक्ति सर्व विघ्न विनाशन कर्ण सिंगरे भगवान की जय गंगा माय जमुना माय की जय तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी भक्ति देवी की जय बोलो श्रीमती राधारानी की जय समवेत भक्त वृंद की जय निताय गौरी प्रमानंदे all glory to the assembly bodies, all glory to the assembly bodies, all glory to the assembly bodies, all glory to Shri Guru Shri Gauranga. Namaste Narasimhaya Namaste Narashivaya. Pralada Lada Daine. Pralada Lada Daine. Hiranyakashipurbhaksha. Hiranyakashipurbhaksha. Silatankanakalaye. Jaya Silatankanakalaye. Ito Nishingo Bharata Nishinga. Ito Nishinga Bharata Nishinga. Jato Jato Jamita Nishinga. Bayi Nishinga Hrudaye Nishinga. Bayi Nishinga Hrudaye Nishinga. Narashinga Madhya Sharanam Prapade. Tabakara Kamalavare Naka Advaita Shinga. Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanabringa. Kesavadita Narahari Rupa. Jai Jagadisha Re. Jai Jagadisha Re. Jai Jagadisha Re. Tavakara Kamalavare Naka Advaita Shinga. Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanabringa. Kesavadita Narahari Rupa. Jai Jagadisha Re. Jai Jagadisha Re. Jai Jagadisha Re. Kesavadita Narahari Rupa. Jai Jagadisha Re. Jai Jagadisha Re. Jai Jagadisha Re. Kesavadita Narahari Rupa. Jai Jagadisha Re. Jai Jagadisha Re. Jai Jagadisha. Jaya Nishingade, Jaya Nishingade, Nishingade, Jaya Nishingade. Jaya Narahari, Jaya Narahari, Narahari, Jaya Narahari. Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha. Jaya Bhakta Prahlad, Prahlad Maharaj. Bhakta Prahlad, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj. Nitai Gora Haribo, 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 Nitai Gora Haribo. जय श्री भक्ति पद सर्वविघ्न विनाशन कृष्ण करे भगवान की जय। जय भक्त श्रेष्ठ प्रहलाद महाराज की जय। श्री हरि नाम संकीर्तन जग की जय। निताय गौरारी प्रेमानंदे हरि हरि बोल। श्री वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय के सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रादे देवी सतवताय नमो नमः। वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय के सब सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्रादे देवी शतवताय नमो नमः। वृंदाई तुलसी बाई प्रिय के सब सत्य कृष्ण भक्ति प्रादे देवी शतवताय नमो नमः। श्रीमती तुलसी महाराज वृंदा देवी की जय। Shri Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha.
Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Ei Abhilashi.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Ei Abhilashi.
Radha Krishna Seva Pavo Ei Abhilashi.
Radha Krishna Seva Prabhu Ei Abhilashi.
Je tomara sharana lo tara vancha purana ho.
Je tumhara sharanala Tara vancha purna.
Kripa kori ko
তুমি কৃপা করে করতরে বৃন্দাবনবাসী
মোরায়ে অভিলাষ বিলাস কুঞ্জে দিও বাস।
মোরা হে অভিলাষ বিলাস কুঞ্জে দিয়বা
নয়নে হরিব সদা যুগল রূপরাশি।
আমি নয়নে দেব সধা যুগল রূপরাশি।
এই নিবেদন ধরো সাখির অনুগাত করো।
এই নিবেদন ধর সখীর অনুগত কর।
সেবাধিকার দিয়ে করো নিজ দাসী।
সেবায়াদি কর দিয়ে কর নিজ দাসী।
দীনা কৃষ্ণ দাসে কোয়ে না মোরা হয়ে।
দীন কৃষ্ণ দাস কয় এই নামরা।
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দা প্রেমে সদাই না ভাসি।
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দ প্রেমে সদাই ভাসি।
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দা প্রেমে সদাই না ভাসি।
শ্রী রাধা গোবিন্দ প্রেমে সদাই নবাসি।
নমো নমঃ তুলসী কৃষ্ণ প্রেয়সী। নমো নমঃ
তুলসী কৃষ্ণ প্রেয়সী নমো নমঃ।
यानि कानि च पापानि भ्रमाहत्यधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे।
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यानि कानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे।
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्याधिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणाशन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे।
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे।
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare.
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani, Tulsi Maharani, Jaya Tulsi Maharani.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi, Jaya Vrinda Devi.
Nityai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nityai Gaura Hari Bol,
Nityai Gaura Hari Bol,
Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Nityai Gaura Hari Bol. Srimati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai.
Jai. Shri Vrindai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Shatavatai Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Vishnu Bhakti Pradidevi Satavatai Namaha. Vrindayai Tulasi Devai Priyai Kesava Satya Krishna Bhakti Pradidevi Shatavatai Namaha. Jashmati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Oh Tulsi, beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you as wishes fulfilled. Bestow your mercy upon him, you make him the resident of Vrindavana. My desire that you also grant me a residence in pleasure groves of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower carry damsels of Raj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me your own maid servant. This very fallen and lowly servant Krishna prays. May I always swim in love with Shri Radha and Govinda. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sikhastakam ki jai. Chaito Darpanamajanam Bhavamadava Nirivapanam Shri Akariva Chandika Vitaranam Vidya Vadu Jivanam Anandam Mudivabhanam Patiparam Punamrita Shradanam Sarvasnam Param Param Jayati Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Namna Makari Vaudha Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pitani Amita Shmarane Nakala Etadrushitava Kripaya Bhagavan Mamapi Durdaivam Idrishamya Jani Nanuraga Trinarapi Sunichena Tarorapi Sarishana Amadina Manadina Kirtanya Sadahari Adhanam Najanam Nasundarim Kavitamba Jagarisha Kamaye Mama Janmane Janmanishwari Bhavatar Bhaktira Itukitvayi Ainandatanu Jakinkaram Paritamam Vishame Bhavam Budau Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Stita Dhuli Sadrisham Vichintaya Nayanam galorashrodharaya Vadanam gadagadarudhaya gira Pulakarin chitam vapukada Tavanam grahane bhavishyati Juga itam nimishena Chakshusha pravrusha itam Shunya itam jagata sarvam Govinda virahe name Asli Shabhapadaratam pinashtumam Adarshnan marmahatam karotuva Jata tathava vidadhatulam poto Matpranatastu saivana para Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Khastakam ki jai. Namo Mahavarannaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gauratve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Patsatyari Shatarine. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtanam, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the five conditioned life of repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large, because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully taste the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can render all benediction to living beings, and thus you have hundreds and millions of names like Krishna and Govind. In these transcendental names, you have invested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by holy names, but I'm so unfortunate that I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street, one should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth unto birth. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor, yet somehow or other I've fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, when will my eyes will be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? When will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on end of the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I am considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna is my Lord, and should remain so, even if it handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Sri Krishna Kam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who dedicate their life for propagating the holy name of the Lord. 2. To consider names of demigods, the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma, to be equal to or independent of the name Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic scriptures or scriptures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination. 6. To give some interpretations to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on the strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider the chanting of Hare Krishna as one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are often Vedas as fruitive activities, karma kanda. 9. To instruct the faithless person by the glories of the holy name. And 10. To not have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments, even after understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against his 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success, Krishna Prema. Now let us offer our most humble obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas, devotees of the Lord. They are just like desired trees, they can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyeva paritanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo namo namo. Jayanta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.
Namaste Saraswati Devi Shri Guru Pranama prayers kijai. Om Aganya Timirasya Yananjana Salakaya Chaturun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Sakitam Bhutali Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swagadantikam Vandeham Shri Gurun Shri Jataha Pachakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shah Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Ragunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Saidvaitam Sabdutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Visakha Nivitam Sa Nama Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namini Shrimaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatarine Om Sraya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Tinamini Shivasavanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vigyana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhu Ujjvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhakti Da Shri Gora Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasudanta Dvantaharine Ma'un Skuraya Krishna Pralamba Rasambo De Padambudayate Namaha Namo Bhagavati Vinodaya Sachitananda Namine Gora Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Gora Vir Bhava Bhumestvam Yadesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhoma Sri Jagannatayate Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavudanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Damne Gurachase Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakam Namami Bhakta Saktikam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Surator Bhangur Mama Manda Mater Gati Matsarva Swapadam Bhojo Radha Madana Mohana Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadumadaha Shrimad Ratnagarat Shrimad Snasito Shrimad Radha Sri Govinda Deva Prastali Bihi Sevyamano Smarami Shriman Rasa Rasambi Tastita Karsan Venus Vaner Gopir Gopinatak Sriyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhaktivindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Anadiradir Govinda Sarvakanana Karanam Chintamani Prakara Sadma Sakalpa Vriksha Laksha Brite Susurabhir Abhibhadyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambrahma Sevyamanam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Kanandam Arvinda Dalayataksham Barhavatam Samasitam Buddhasundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Visesa Sobam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasadvanamalyavam Siratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribanga Lalita Niyata Prakasam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakilendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Sachidanandam Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujwala Vigrahasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutamanadi Mananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navyovanam Cha Vedesa Durlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsara Samprakamyo Vayora Tapi Manasomani Pungamanam Sobhyasti Yad Prapadasim Yavichintya Tatve Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chaitum Jagranda Kotim Yes Chaktirasti Jagranda Chayayadanta Dantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindam Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diomanajasta Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktaryam Eva Nigama Pratitastavanti Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasapati Bhavita Tabirya Eva Nijirupa Tayakalabi Goloka Eva Nusata Kilatma Bhuta Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santak Sadeva Hidesha Vilokanti Yam Yam Sam Sundarama Chintya Gunaswarupan Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukalani Menitisna Nanan Vatana Karud Bhuvanesa Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Purmamyo Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Pavato Jagananda Koti Koti Svasesu Vasadadi Vibhuti Bina Tad Brahmanis Kalamanantam Asesa Bhutam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Yasya Jagadanda Satani Sute Straigunya Tad Visaya Vida Vitayamanam Sadvavulambi Parasatvam Visuddha Satvam Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasun Prani Nampativalam Smadatam Upekya Lilaya Tena Bhuvanani Jaya Yajasram Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nijadamni Tale Chitasya Devi Mahesa Aridama Satesu Tesu Tete Prabhavini Jaya Vitasya Yena Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Sristista Tepalaya Sada Vasakti Reka Jaya Vyasya Bhuvanani Bharti Durga Ichana Rupam Abhyasya Chachesta Tesa Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shiram Yatada Devikara Visesa Yoga Sanjaya Tena Itata Pritakasti Hetu Yasambutama Pitatasama Paitikarya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Deparcha Devhita Santanam Abhyupetya Dipaya Devita Hitu Samana Dharma Yes Tadra gave Hitya Vishnu Tayavivati Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yamkarna Narnava Jaleba Jitisma Yoga Nidramananta Jagadanda Saturama Kupa Hara Satima Valamya Param Samurtim Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Nisvasita Kalamatavalamya Jivanti Loma Villaja Jagananda Narta Vishnu Mahansa Yasya Kalavisesa Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Basmanya Tasma Sakalation Jesu Teja Sriyam Kiya Prakatiyat Apitadvarapta Mamaya Esan Jagananda Vidana Karta Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yatpada Pala Vigambinidaya Kumbha Dwande Pranamasama Yesa Ganadi Raja Vignan Vihanta Malamasya Jagatrayasya Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahi Gaganamambu Marudisasya Kalasta Tatlamana Siti Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Visanti Yamcha Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yas Chaksuresa Savitasa Kalagrahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmota Papa Nichaya Sutayasta Pamsi Brahmadi Kita Patagavati Yasijivaha Yadata Matari Bhava Prakatapabhava Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastrinda Gopamatavenda Mahosva Karma Bandhana Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nirdhati Kintacha Bhakti Bhajam Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Kroda Kamasa Japana Adibiti Vatsaya Moha Guru Guru Visavya Bhava Sanchintya Tasya Sadvisim Taramapurete Govinda Mahadi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Sriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpatarama Durmabha Mishchitama Ekanama Eto Amritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivam Sipriyasaki Chirandam Jutik Varam Apitada Swadhyam Apicha Sayata Shrabi Shraviti Shrabi Vyastasuma Nemesa Dakiva Rajitahi Rakvit Samaya Gajestritad Vipam Tamaham Ihokola Kamitiam Vidantas Tesan Takshiti Virachara Katipaye Shri Guru Vastaka prayers Gijay. Spiritual masters receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as the cloud pours water on the forest fire to extinguish it. So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence out of my respectful basis unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master's ocean of auspicious qualities. Chanting the holy name, dancing next singing and playing musical instruments, the spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu because he is relishing the relish of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end, he feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes like waves. I, from my respectful base, not the lotus feet of such spiritual masters. Spiritual master is always engaged in temple worship of Shishi Radha and Krishna. He also engaged his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship. But Lord, I, from my respectful base, not the lotus feet of such spiritual masters. Spiritual master is always offering Krishna of four kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are satisfied being Bhagavat Prasada, he is satisfied over my respectful base unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conscious past and erotic and modern and qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment offer my respectful base unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he's expert in assisting gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavan. Offer my respectful, most humble base unto the lotus feet of such spiritual master. The spiritual master be honored as much Supreme Lord, because he is the most confidential servant to the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful base unto the lotus feet of such spiritual masters, a bona fide representative of Sri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master at least 3 times a day. I should offer my respectful basis unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, his divine grace. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantha Raja Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 27. Tato bhavam mahatatvam avyaktat kalakchoditat vijnanat matma dehastam visvam vyanjam stamo nuda. Tata, thereafter, abhavat, came into existence, mahat, supreme, tattvam, sum total, avyaktat, from the unmanifested, kala choditat, by the interaction of time, vijnana atma, unalloyed goodness, atma dehastam, situated on the bodily self, vishwam, complete universes, Vyanjan, manifesting. Tamanuda, the supreme light. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thereafter, influenced by the interactions of eternal time, the supreme sum total of matter called the Mahat Tattva became manifested, and in this Mahat Tattva, the unalloyed goodness, the Supreme Lord sowed the seeds of universal manifestation out of his own body. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. In due course of time, the impregnated material energy was manifested first as the total material ingredients. Everything takes its own time to fructify, and therefore the word kala choditat, influenced by time, is used herein. The Mahatattva is the total consciousness because a portion of it is represented in everyone as the intellect. The Mahatattva is directly connected with the supreme consciousness of the Supreme Being, but still it appears as matter. The Mahatattva, or shadow of pure consciousness, is the germinating place of all creation. It is pure goodness with the slight addition of the material mode of passion, and therefore activities generated from this point. Text 28. First of all, thereafter, influenced by the interactions of eternal time, the supreme sum total of matter called the Mahatattva became manifested, and in this Mahatattva, the unalloyed goodness, the Supreme Lord, sowed the seeds of universal manifestation out of his own body. Text 28. Sopiyam sakuna kalatma bhagavat dristigochara atmanam yakarud atma viswasyasya sisrikshaya sa mahatattva api also amsa purusha plenary expansion guna chiefly the quality of ignorance kala the duration of time atma full consciousness bhagavat the personality of Godhead drishtigochara range of sight atmanam many different forms vyakarot differentiated. Atma, reservoir. Viswasya, the would-be entities. Asya, of this. Sisrikshaya, generates the false ego. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Thereafter, the Mahatattva differentiated itself into many different forms as the reservoir of the would-be entities. The Mahatattva is chiefly in the mode of ignorance, and it generates the false ego. It is a plenary expansion of the personality of Godhead with full consciousness of creative principles and time for fructification. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The Mahatattva is the via medium between pure spirit and material existence. It is the junction of matter and spirit, wherefrom the false ego of the living entity is generated. All living entities are differentiated parts and parcels of the personality of Godhead. Under the pressure of false ego, the conditioned souls, although parts and parcels of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, claim to be the enjoyers of material nature. This false ego is the binding force of material existence. The Lord again and again gives a chance to the bewildered, conditioned souls to get free from this false ego. And that is why the material creation takes place at intervals. He gives the conditioned souls all facilities for rectifying the activities of the false ego, but he does not interfere with their small independence as parts and parcels of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Therefore, the Mahatattva differentiated itself into many different forms as the reservoir of the would-be entities. The Mahatattva is chiefly in the mode of ignorance, and it generates the false ego. It is a plenary expansion of the personality of Godhead with full consciousness of creative principles and time for fructification. Gaur Premanandi Hari Bol. So this is a very interesting two verses. And this is the continuation of the subject, how Krishna creates the material world. Certain questions were asked of Krishna, and he's answering them now. And one of those questions are, how did you create this material world? The spiritual world is eternal. It's not created. It's always been existing, and it will always continue to exist. But the material world is something that's created at some point and wrapped up, or not annihilated, but reabsorbed at another point into the body of Mahavishnu. So how has this happened when something comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but actually it's, in a sense, contaminated by the modes of ignorance? Does that mean that God is also subject to ignorance? No. We see that, first of all, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of everything. And the first emanation of Krishna is Balaram. And then from Balaram is expanded the first Chaturvyuha. And then from the first Chaturvyuha is expanded Narayana. And then from the first Chaturvyuha, the second Chaturvyuha is expanded. And from the second Chaturvyuha, the Purusha avatars are expanded. And from the Purusha avatars, the material world begins to be created. So between Krishna and Mahavishnu, there's a lot of things that happen, and there are infinite number of planets in the spiritual world, and three major divisions. You have Vaikuntha, and you have Dwarka, and you have Goloka. So it's populated with an infinite number of expansions of Krishna. And then you have jivas. And most of the jivas are liberated souls in the Vaikuntha and Goloka. But some have fallen down. So there has to be a place for the ones that have fallen. Just like in society, some people commit criminal activities. So the society has to set up a place for the criminal activities for two purposes. One is to be rehabilitated and returned back into normal society, or to be kept incarcerated because they are not able to correct themselves, and therefore they remain separated. Now, in the case of living entities are eternal, so they can go back to Godhead at any time if they take up hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from pure devotees, or they can continue sinning and remain locked up in the shackles of birth, death, old age, and disease over and over and over again. So we see Krishna, there's a great distance between the original form of Krishna and Mahavishnu, and from Mahavishnu, the material creation takes place. Now, there's another interesting point, and that is that the Mahat Tattva is a plenary expansion of Krishna. And that's an amazing statement. With full consciousness of creative principles and time for fructification. So anything that's evolved takes time. It doesn't happen right away. On the other hand, by the time you come to the different species of living entities, that happens in a sense rather quickly. So let's see where that's said. It's in the Bhagavad Gita. Let me see if I can find that quickly. Okay, I'll come back to that point. Let's just see if I can find it in my chapter. Okay, I'll come back to that point. Yeah. So, 9th chapter, 8th verse, Prabhupada writes in the purport, it says, the whole cosmic order is under me, Krishna says. Under my will, it is automatically manifested again and again, and under my will, it is annihilated at the end. And in the second paragraph to that verse, 9.8, it says, now, as far as the living entities are concerned, they are impregnated into this material nature. Well, we've read that already in the previous several verses. And that's done by sa-aikshata, just by Krishna glancing over material nature, living entities are impregnated. And Prabhupada says that the offspring of any living being is born from the father, born after the father impregnates the mother with semen, and the living entity floating in the semen of the father takes the shape of the mother's form. Similarly, mother material nature cannot produce any living entity from her material elements unless and until she is impregnated with living entities by the Lord himself. That is the mystery of generation of the living entities. This impregnating process is performed by the first Purusha incarnation, Karanar Navasai Vishnu, or Mahavishnu. Simply by his glance over material nature, the whole matter is accomplished. We should not understand the process of impregnation by the personality of Godhead in terms of our conception of sex. The omnipotent Lord can impregnate just by his eyes, and therefore he is called all-potent. Each and every part of his transcendental body can perform each and every function of the other parts. This is confirmed in the Brahma Samhita 532, Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vritti Manti. Okay, so now, and coming up to 9.8, now as far as the living entities are concerned, they are impregnated into this material nature, and as a result of their past deeds, they take different positions. In other words, you have 8,400,000 different positions that can be taken up by the living entities. Thus, the activities of this material world begin. The activities of the different species of living beings are begun from the very moment of the creation. It is not that all is evolved. The different species of life are created immediately along with the universe. Men, animals, beasts, birds, everything is simultaneously created because whatever desires the living entities had at the last annihilation are again manifested. It is clearly indicated here by the word avasam that the living entities have nothing to do with this process. The state of being in their past life, in the past creation, is the inconceivable potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And after creating different species of life, he has no connection with them. The creation takes place to accommodate the inclinations of the various living entities, and so the Lord does not become involved with it. Very interesting. So here it says, in the verse today, number 20, 27 and then 28. Thereafter, influenced by the interactions of eternal time, the supreme sum total of matter called the Mahatattva became manifested. And in this Mahatattva, the unalloyed goodness, the Supreme Lord sowed the seeds of universal manifestation out of his own body. So those seeds are living entities. Right? In due course of, and in the purport it says, in due course of time, the impregnated material energy was manifested first as the total material ingredients. Everything takes its own time to fructify, and therefore the word kala choditat, influenced by time, is used herein. The Mahatattva is this total consciousness because a portion of it is represented in everyone as the intellect. The Mahatattva is directly connected with the supreme consciousness of the Supreme Being, but still it appears as matter. The Mahatattva, or shadow of pure consciousness, is the germinating place of all creation. It is pure goodness with the slight addition of the material mode of passion, and therefore activity is generated from this point. This is all very highly qualified, not qualified, but highly confidential information explained by Srila Prabhupada and stated first by Krishna. It takes time to understand this. Obviously, there are things that are not easily understood because we're talking about how the world was created, material world was created. So it's a complicated thing. But what we should know is everything is coming from Krishna. He's the original source of everything. If you know what the source is, then you have real knowledge. If you don't know what the source is, you don't really have real knowledge, and everything after that is going to be speculation. So that's the position of scientists. They have a chance to know what the source of everything is, but they refuse it. because of their false ego. So we see how dangerous the false ego is. A person can reject the truth because of false ego. And from that point on, every decision they make is going to be wrong. So it's a serious consequence to reject the origin of things. But here we're having an exhaustive discussion of what is the origin of the material creation and how it actually happens and progresses. Where else can you read this? If you read the Bible, it's in the Genesis of the Bible, it said, on the first day God created this, and the second day he created that, and the third day he created something else, and the fourth day he created something else, the fifth day he created this, sixth day he created that, and the seventh day he took rest. That's all it says. There's no more than that, right? But look what we're hearing here, chapter after chapter, very, very detailed information of how the material world is actually created. So this is the science of Krishna. It has nothing to do with mythology or stories or, maybe like this or maybe like that. Right? It's a specific step-by-step information of how the material world was created. And we have to realize this is scientific knowledge. How can he be so sure? I mean, he's explaining so many details here. How do we know it's true, right? You can't make this up. Has anybody else ever written this? Nobody has ever written like this about how the creation took place. You can read the Bible; it's there, right? It's very sketchy. There's hardly any detail like this, right? This is highly detailed. So we have to realize what a special privilege it is to hear and read Srimad Bhagavatam. This should be the main subject that everyone learns in their life. Not this nonsense subject. It all started by a big bang. And then the first amoeba, well, we don't know exactly how that started, but it did happen in some kind of primordial soup. This is all nonsense. This crazy stuff. It's enough to make somebody vomit. Once you understand what the real story is, then you see how these people are just bluffing. They're not scientists, they're bluffers. They're just trying to poison your mind to think that God doesn't exist. That's why they make up these false theories, right? And we shouldn't even let our children hear this because it poisons the mind. It becomes a sort of disease that lasts for the whole lifetime, and people end up in illusory states of mind thinking that they can succeed in this world. Everybody is going to fail because this world is a miserable place. This is explained by Krishna. How are you going to succeed in such a miserable place? That's why everyone goes through the 6 stages of life. They're born, they stay, they grow, and then they give off byproducts, then they dwindle, and then they die. 6 stages. Everyone is going through it. So where is their success in those 6 stages? It's all leading toward failure. And but yet people get into a state of illusion. They think, oh, well, by 2050 we will solve the riddle of death, and it'll be optional whether you want to die or not. This is called crazy stuff. This is nonsense. It's not true at all, right? No one is going to be free from death. Why? Because what dies is the body, not the soul. But they don't accept the existence of the soul. So how can we believe anything they say when all the foundational points that they believe in are wrong? And we shouldn't even learn those things. We shouldn't even hear about those things because it's just going to mislead us, right? And mislead to what? That sense gratification is the goal of life, and you only have one life, and everything is relative. And there's no God, there's no spiritual world. This These are the conclusions. And then the only prayer the materialist has is, after I die, I hope there's nothing. What kind of life is that? What kind of knowledge is that? There's no knowledge there. That's all ignorance. And unless we realize this, we don't actually accept the validity of Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, although these are the only two scriptures that are perfectly spoken and absolutely true. There's nothing else that compares to these two scriptures. And now you're seeing why we say that. Look at all this detail, where all this detail came from. Did somebody make it up? They can't even make it up. If they could have made it up, it would already be there in a bestseller somewhere. New York Times bestseller, right? No one has ever written this before. And that's why they try to avoid it, right? Is this recommended reading anywhere? No. Only in the temples. It's not recommended. They don't recommend read the Srimad Bhagavatam in college or high school or elementary school, or read Bhagavad Gita. No. If they do read Bhagavad Gita, the class comes together and everyone has a chance to speculate what it means. When one of my daughters went to University of Washington, and then she met, and she was taking, majoring in art and culture she was studying Sanskrit and majoring in art and culture of India, and then she became part of this little group of mostly Indian kids. They were meeting in the house of a very rich man in Medina, and they were reading Bhagavad Gita, and everybody had a chance to speculate on what it means. And my daughter told me they went around, they read a verse, then they go around and said, "What do you think it means? And what do you think it means? And what do you think it means?" And each one gave their own interpretation, right? You think they're ever going to understand Bhagavad Gita like that? Not at all, And not one of them became a devotee. Not one of them. Why? Because they had no contact with a genuine devotee. Now, when I say not one of them, does that include my daughter? Yes and no, because she grew up being a devotee and she's still in association with some devotees, so she's not completely lost. The others are all completely lost. Not one of them became Krishna conscious. So this is what happens when we become educated by mundane knowledge. Mundane knowledge will never lead us in the right direction. It's all nonsense. Even this whole thing, the ultimate mundane knowledge is metaverse. That is the ultimate. You create your own universe. Do you think there's going to be any validity in that universe? No. And they call it metaverse. In other words, it means you're going to create your own universe, your own reality, right? So all of this is, and that's why, by the way, Facebook is not doing so well. Because they're trying to create something that they know, the guys that are creating it, they all know this is nonsense. This is not good for society, right? So they're doing it with tongue in cheek, right? And it's not succeeding. What's succeeding is the companies like Google that are they have the search engine, and they have they make money by developing all these high-powered tools for organizing information and things like that. That makes money. But metaverse, is that going to make money? Yeah, it'll just be pornography on steroids. They already have the pornography as the main thing people look at on the internet. Now it's going to go on steroids, right? But even that, people get tired of, right? Because it doesn't lead to any happiness. It just leads to more frustration, right?
I was talking to one of the devotees who's also a developer in Facebook Meta. he said even while they are developing and testing, for more than half an hour they're not able to look at that space, the meta space. Uh, so
It's
they're
bewildering.
getting into dizziness and headaches.
Yeah. Yeah, it is actually a way of destroying the brain, not doing anything positive with the brain, right? Because it's all illusory. Say, when it says, Janmadasya yata nivyad itaratas charte so avidya swarat, tene brahma hridaya adhikave muyanti yat suraya. So this first verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam, basically it's explaining that the material world appears in the mind of materialists as an illusion. So all the metaverse is doing is amplifying the illusion. So how will that lead to anything positive? It will not lead to anything positive. It's just going to be completely negative. It's just like thinking, oh, if I take LSD, I'll see God. Do you think you will see God by taking LSD or any drug? No. What you end up seeing is a bunch of demons, and it freaks you out. You're not going to see God. Some people say, no, I saw the light. I saw the light. Yeah, I actually saw the light, right? But it's an illusion. It's not a fact. So, therefore, when we look at the deity, we're looking at something that's factual. Now, even though it's made out of matter, because Pran Pratishtha ceremony has been performed, and Krishna has been invited to live in the deity, and also we treat it like Krishna. Say, now, if it's a statue, just like you have the statue of Gandhi at the library in Bellevue, right? It's outside. So, birds are crapping on it. And once a year, they have a little ceremony there. They sing some songs, some bhajans, and they put a little garland, and they do some little arti. But that's once a year. So is that a deity? No, it's not. It's just a statue, right? It's treated like a statue. You worship it once a year, and the rest of the time, no one washes it, no one cleans it, every day the deities are bathed, right? Every day, fresh flowers are put on them. Every day, the clothes are put on, etc. And every day they are fed, and they're arti 6 times a day. We don't get treatment like that. There's nobody doing arti to anybody here 6 times a day, and getting nice food 6 times a day, and getting bathed and things like that. No, this is like, this is like a super spa, right? Why? Because we treat the deity as Krishna. It's not a statue. Gandhi is being treated like a statue, right? But not the deity. So therefore, we have to understand what is real and what is not real. This whole hoax of university education is a hoax. They're not being educated. They're being programmed to be consumers and people who are being exploited. Just like someone's working and they say, I got to take a break, for at least a half an hour. It's hurting my brain. What's that going to do to the people that buy that metaverse nonsense and start looking at it day and night? See, it's going to damage the brain. It's not going to help the brain. And it damaged their whole life. Okay, so here is a very detailed explanation of how the creation actually took place. And can we understand everything that's being said? I don't think so. It'll be realized and more as time goes on. You don't see, that's why a lot of these points that we're reading now are going to be explained in more depth and later on in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And our realization will go deeper and deeper. This is like a kaleidoscopic process. There's many, many layers of realization that will take place. So when it says, in due course of time, the impregnated material energy was manifested first as the total material ingredients: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Everything takes its own time to fructify, and therefore the word kala choditat, influenced by time, is used herein. Okay, well, we just read, it says that now, as far, and this is Bhagavad Gita 9.8, now, as far as the living entities are concerned, they are impregnated into this material nature. Well, that happens right away, right? Krishna's just glancing, and all the living entities are impregnated into material nature. And as a result of their past deeds, they take different positions. Thus, the activities of this material world begin. The activities of the different species of living beings are begun from the very moment of the creation. It is not that all is evolved. Well, that's what Darwin said. Everything evolved through evolution. The different species of life are created immediately along with the universe. Men, animals, beasts, birds, everything is simultaneously created. That's 3 times he's saying here. It happens simultaneously. It happens right away. Well, over here, he says, in due course of time, the impregnated material energy was manifested first as the total material ingredients. Everything takes its own time to fructify, and therefore the word kala choditat, influenced by time, is used here. Now, it doesn't say here that how much time, right? In 9.8, it gives a specific statement. It happens simultaneously or right away. See? So it's very easy to make a mistake. Someone can think, well, you see, that proves what Darwin says. It's a very gradual, long process of evolution. No, that's not what's being said here. He says, basically, everything takes its own time. Kala choditat, influenced by time. But the influence by time for the material creation actually goes very quickly. Completely opposite of what Darwin is saying. Right? That's why Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita is the undergraduate study, Srimad Bhagavatam is the graduate study, and Chaitanya Charitamrita is the postgraduate study. So we should read Bhagavad Gita first, and then Srimad Bhagavatam. But then we're going to see that to understand Bhagavad Gita better, there are many explanations in Srimad Bhagavatam, and sometimes to understand Srimad Bhagavatam better, there are many explanations in the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, they go together. You cannot separate them. Okay, so then it says, the Mahatattva is a total consciousness because a portion of it is represented in everyone as the intellect. So consciousness means how you're aware of things. Look the word up, consciousness. You know. It means that you become aware of things. That's what consciousness is. When you're unconscious, you're not aware. When you're conscious, you're very much aware. What's it say?
It's the state of being awake and aware of one's surroundings.
There it is. And so when you're asleep, you're not aware of anything, right? Or you might be having dreams. But even dreams, in deep sleep, there are no dreams. It's only happening when you're going to sleep and when you're waking up from sleep that you dream. Right? In deep sleep, there's no dreams. Right? So, but the Mahatattva is directly connected with the supreme consciousness of the Supreme Being, but still it appears as matter. That's a very profound statement there. What that actually means, you have to keep hearing and going further and further. It's going to be explained in much more depth. The Mahatattva, or shadow of pure consciousness, is the germinating place of all creation. So now the concept of the shadow comes in, and that's very important. I never understood what it meant when it says that one sees the shadow of reality in the darkness of the material world. What does that mean exactly? Well, when you're driving a car at night, if you look out the side window of your car, and behind it is darkness, you see a reflection of yourself. Have you ever seen that? You know, when you look out your window and there's light outside, you don't see that reflection. But when it's very dark outside, you look out the window and you see a reflection of yourself in the window. That is the reflection. That's what's meant by the reflection in darkness, right? And it's not real, but it looks real. So you can try that when it's dark outside. No, I'm not talking about your the side window. Yeah, sometimes you'll see it in the regular windshield also, but mostly you'll see it on the side window when it's dark outside. You look and you see yourself, right? You've seen that? Yeah.
Even in the home, like when it's dark,
Yeah.
there's a big glass window.
That's what it means by seeing the reflection in darkness. Now, you say reflection in darkness. If it's dark, how can there be a reflection? But there is, right? That just shows that everything is perfectly stated in the Bhagavatam, right, and Bhagavad Gita. Reflection in darkness. I never understood it until one time I looked out the window and I'm seeing this reflection of myself. And I said, my God, what is this? Then I realized that's what he's talking about, in the Bhagavatam, is a reflection in darkness. Now, look up the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam, because it's either mentioned there or in the second verse. Let's read that. All this is very interesting, because you see how there are illusory things in the material world, very illusory. Read the translation of the first verse, Bhagavatam.
What's verse?
And you look up the second verse. What does it say?
It's just the translation of the first verse or the second verse?
First verse. Read it.
So, O my Lord, Sri Krishna, son of Vasudeva, O all-pervading personality of Godhead, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. I meditate upon Lord Sri Krishna because he is the absolute truth and the primeval cause of all causes of the creation, sustenance, and destruction of the manifested universes. He is directly and indirectly conscious of all manifestations, and he is independent because there is no other cause beyond
So when
him.
it says indirectly, it means by his expansions, he's directly and indirectly conscious of everything. Go ahead.
It is he only who first imparted the Vedic knowledge unto the heart of Brahmaji, the original living being. By him, even the great sages and demigods are placed into illusion, as one is bewildered by the illusory representations of water seen in fire or land seen on water.
Okay, so water seen in fire, when you're driving on an asphalt highway, right, let's say in the desert, right, or on a hot day, you see water in the distance on the road, but there's no water there. It's an optical illusion because of the heat, and when there's heat like that, there is some kind of reflection of light, but it's an illusion, and you see water where there's no water. And sometimes when you're on a boat in the ocean, and you look in the distance, you see land, but there's no land there. Again, that's another optical illusion, right? Go ahead.
Only because of him do the material universes temporarily manifested by the reactions of the three modes of the nature appear factual, although they are unreal.
See? When it means unreal, it doesn't mean that they don't exist, but it means that they're temporary, And in the material world, you see illusory things like the water in the distance on an asphalt highway, or land in the distance in the ocean, or keep going. Let's hear some more.
I therefore meditate upon him, Lord Sri Krishna, who is eternally existent in the transcendental abode, which is forever free from the illusory representations of the material world.
So you want to be free from the illusory representation of the material world, you have to be focused on Krishna. What is mundane education? Take your focus away from Krishna. What are you going to see then? You're only going to see illusory things. Everything started by a big bang. We come from monkeys. There's gender neutrality. There's this thing. There's that thing. All concepts that are wrong. That's all we're going to see. That's all we're going to be taught. You know. Go ahead. Now let's hear the second.
The second verse. I meditate upon him, for he is the absolute truth. That's the ending. Next one. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated.
Okay, so that means no Satyanarayana Puja, no Bhagavat Saptaha, no Lalita, this and that. You know, go ahead. that eliminates a lot of things right there.
This completely
No more. Oh, your uncle died. Don't go to the temple for 3 months. Don't chant Hare Krishna. Don't do any pujas at home. You know, that eliminates all that stuff.
That's a very big illusion, Maharaj. Like, even though neophytes are following Krishna consciousness, still I've seen many times.
Yeah, they get a call from their relatives in India. So don't chant Hare Krishna. Don't go to the temple. Don't do any puja. Don't do this. Don't do that. Yeah. Go ahead.
completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest
How
truth.
can you be pure in heart if you're hearing nonsense all the time?
Yes.
Darwinism, Freudianism, and Marxism. How could you be pure in heart by hearing those philosophies? It's impossible. You get corrupted by it. You know. Go ahead.
The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all.
How are you going to distinguish between reality and illusion unless you hear Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam? You won't be able to distinguish what's real and what's not real. Go ahead.
Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart.
There you go. Why should we read anything else? Right? It doesn't say, oh, you can read all the books, then you'll get educated. You read all the books, you get confused. You just read Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Anyway, that'll take a lifetime already, right? And sometimes many lifetimes. So, you see, this is what Lord Chaitanya taught. This is what Goswamis taught. This is what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is teaching. This is what Srila Prabhupada is teaching. But we're not getting the message. We're not getting the message. When someone is working for Facebook or Metaverse to create an illusory, a super on steroids illusion for people, how can you say that they have read Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam when the whole message is don't even play with it, don't even go near these things, because they're all illusory. We have to think about this, because we cannot preach successfully if we are subjected to this type of dalliance. Look that word up, it's a good word, dalliance, D-A-L-L-I-A-N-C-E. D-A-L-L-I-A-N-C-E.
Dalliance is a brief or casual involvement with something.
Something nonsense.
Yeah, and casual romantic or sexual relationship.
Yeah. So we're dilly-dallying. That's another word, dilly-dallying, with nonsense, thinking it's okay, but it's actually damaging the brain of everybody, kids and adults, by dilly-dallying with these nonsense concepts and nonsense so-called courses and so-called university education and this thing and that thing. It's damaging. Or when you're a little kid, you read what's the name of that book? Dog Man. Right. Recommended reading for all kids. They're forced to read it. Instead of forcing them to read Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, they're forced to read Dog Man. Now, what are you going to find out? What are you going to learn from Dog Man book? Right? You see. It's in one sense, see, the Muslims are smarter than the Hindus because, they force their kids at first to read Quran. And they make them memorize the Quran. This was one black American. He converted to Islam, right? And there was an interview I saw of him, and one man was saying, "So what did you learn in the madrasa?" The boy was born in the United States, right? But he goes to, I think it was Saudi Arabia or one of those countries, and lived there for like 2 or 3 years, right? He said, "Well, we were studying the Quran every day." He said, "Really? Did you learn Arabic?" He said, "Yeah, I can speak Arabic now. I can read and write Arabic." And then he started quoting the Quran, right? Just like when we quote the Brahma Samhita, right? He started quoting the Quran, right, in very good Arabic. So you see, they're smarter than most people because they know. Look, don't waste your time with this other stuff. Just stick to the Quran. That's where the truth is. But Krishna is saying the same thing, right? But are we listening? I don't know if we're actually listening, or if we might be listening, but do we actually understand what's being said? We should be hearing this Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam every day. Prabhupada, he said 3 times a day. We hardly do it once a day, right? He said 3 times a day. And we should memorize, and we should be able to learn every day more and more deeply. It's not that you learn a lot of facts. You learn the fundamental things deeper and deeper, right? Until, like Prabhupada, you can just speak, like nectarine, Krishna consciousness to anybody, and then people are surprised. How did you learn all these things, right? Okay. So we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? This is a big subject. We're actually hearing how Krishna created the material creation, step by step, detail by detail. Nobody else has ever written anything like this. There's no other book that compares to this. But yet we don't read it, and we don't come to class. We're very snug by knowing very little. Little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Yeah, little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Just like little knowledge, you can use vinegar to clean your toilet. Okay. But did you know that if you mix vinegar with Clorox, you will die in about 5 minutes because it releases chlorine gas, which is a poisonous gas. Did you know that? I've said it before. But no, did you ever learn that by reading the fine detail on the Clorox bottle? No. It's extremely dangerous. Not so long ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, this man who has a restaurant, he had this smart idea of mixing vinegar with the Clorox to make things cleaner, right? So he's cleaning the floor with the the mixture of Clorox and vinegar, he fainted and died in a matter of minutes. The chlorine gas is not. They were using chlorine gas in World War I to kill each other in Europe, right? And since that, they've outlawed it as a weapon in war. It's against the law, as if they can regulate such a thing. But it's against the law to use chlorine gas in a wartime because it's so lethal. But you can make it in your house very easily. Just mix vinegar with chlorine, with Clorox, and you'll have chlorine gas, and you kill everybody in the house. Right. That's if you want to commit suicide, of course. Haribol.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Sorry. So in this purport we have it is mentioned that our consciousness. So is it our consciousness the basically part is a
No, it
shadow of
it
our
says here, the Mahatattva is the total consciousness because a portion of it is represented in everyone as the intellect. That's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. So we are the portion of the super consciousness.
So you have to understand, when Krishna impregnates the living entities into the Mahatattva, there are infinite number of living entities. Every part of the Mahatattva has a living entity in it. But each one of those living entities only shares in a portion of the consciousness. And the Mahatattva is talking about the Mahatattva as if it's a person, right? Okay, either it's an individual person or it is a collective number of people, each one having some part of intellect, right? So that's why you have to read this very carefully. The wording is, Prabhupada, he explains that he had to have absolute silence when he was translating and no interruptions because he had to choose every word very carefully. So don't forget, he's translating from Sanskrit to English. So he's got to find exact or closely exact equivalents of the English words to the Sanskrit words. So it's not an easy thing to do that. So if you read this, he's talking about impregnated material energy. And it was first manifested as the total material ingredients. So, what does it mean exactly, right? He had to find these words, and he chose them very carefully, right? So this is a short purport, but to understand this short purport, it's going to take a long time. And we'll only understand by the mercy of Krishna, right? Krishna says, that he gives the knowledge by which we can come back to him. But it depends on how much we are actually surrendered to Krishna and engaged in his service. So although we read this today, the more we surrender, the more we focus our mind and our senses on pleasing Krishna, the more realization we'll have of this short paragraph, which is explaining how the material creation took place. It's not that right away we're going to understand it. And
when they say that shadow of consciousness, so consciousness is consciousness. So when they say shadow of consciousness, what is the difference between these two?
Because everything in the material world is a imperfect reflection of the spiritual world by 180 degrees. So what does that mean? That means it's inverted, number one. And it's a reflection. So you're not seeing it exactly as it is in the spiritual world. You're seeing an inverted reflection in darkness. That's a third aspect, in darkness. Just like I said, you look out on a dark night, you look out the window on your left-hand side when you're driving, and you'll see a reflection of yourself in the darkness. Is that thing real? No. But it looks real. That's what we're seeing in the material world.
So
It's a reflection in the darkness.
Yeah. So since we are a portion of this reflection,
And by the way, it's inverted.
yeah.
It's not right side up. It's wrong side down. Go ahead.
So since this we are the portion of this reflected or the shadow of the consciousness, so is it? I mean, how it does it becomes the pure consciousness ever or no?
Yeah, as soon as you purify your senses, which includes the mind and the intelligence, you'll be able to see correctly. And see, you have not listened to my classes. What was I explaining about the mystery of Krishna consciousness? When you purify yourself, then you, like Lord Brahma, when he wrote and recited the Brahma Samhita, how did he do that? Krishna gave him the eyes to see the spiritual world, or at least part of it. And he's just describing what he's seeing. That's what the Brahma Samhita is. Chintamani prakarasatma sukalpa riksha lakshavrite susurabir apibaliantam lakshmi sahasra satasam brahma sevyamanam govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami. He's actually seeing that. He's just describing what he's seeing because he received the eyes to see, because he did tapasya for hundreds and thousands, maybe a million years, and it pleased Krishna. So then Krishna blessed him with the eyes to see or have a vision of the spiritual world, and he's describing it to us. That's a mystery. I'll go over it again tomorrow. Prabhupada's talking about the mystery of Krishna consciousness is when you develop love for Krishna, you actually see Krishna in real time. Just like Sanjaya, he's seeing in real time the discussion taking place hundreds of miles away in Kurukshetra, right? But he's explaining exactly what Krishna is saying in real time, and explaining what's going on. How did he do that? There was no internet then. There was no television. He had the inner television. And this is a mysterious thing. How is it working? There's no wires, there's no electromagnetic waves. Somehow he's seeing, there's a mystery about it. You have to pay very close attention to all the classes. We've explained this before. So once we become purified, once we purify our senses, with no more material desires, and regularly hearing Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam every day, spoken by genuine devotees, and not eating any nonsense, not doing any nonsense, and all of a sudden, your spiritual senses manifest. They're covered right now. And the senses that we have now are material senses. But we have in our soul these spiritual senses. They become reactivated by purifying the contaminated senses. So there's a whole new reality. And it happened to Brahma, and he was actually describing what he was seeing, really, with those purified senses. Okay? So we have a lot of work to do. And it's not going to help learning about Darwinism and Marxism and Freudianism and gender neutrality and Big Bang and we come from monkeys. That's not going to help us purify our senses. That's going to contaminate the senses and the mind. See? And metaverse, create your own universe. What's going to be in your universe, Prabhu? They're going to destroy the consciousness. Yes.
Yeah, Maharaj, about the mystery, sometime back you have mentioned from the Bhagavad Gita introduction, and I will just read one line. Unless one reads the Bhagavad Gita in a submissive spirit, it is very difficult to understand Bhagavad Gita because it is a great mystery. That you had mentioned about that.
Also in the introduction it says that even if you don't believe in God, you should at least accept that God exists when you read Bhagavad Gita. Otherwise, you won't understand it.
Yeah,
In other words, even if you don't believe in God, that's okay. But when you read Bhagavad Gita, you should accept that God exists. Then you will understand it. But if you read it without accepting that God exists, you won't understand a damn thing.
Yeah, that is a complete paragraph. I just read the last
Right,
line. That
right.
was the beginning of the paragraph.
Exactly. Okay, we'll stop there. Hare Krishna. You see how rare thing it is to hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Very, very. Most people are not interested at all. They want to hear the news. What's happening in Ukraine? What nonsense did Biden speak today? What good is hearing all that? What's happening to Trump? When's he going to be put in jail? And all these nonsense things that you're hearing, as if it really is important.
That is changing every day, Maharaj, that news.
It's getting worse and worse every day.
How long we can track that?
Okay, who's going to sing?
Sri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Bandhamuri Savadhana Mate
Bandhamuri Savadhana Mate
Jahara Prasade Bhai E Bhava Toriya Jai Krishna Prapti Ho Jaha Hote
Krishna Prapti Hoya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Kya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya
Arna Kori Ho Mane Asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asa
Sri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Jai Prasade Pure Sarva Asha
Ye Prasade Pure Sarva
चक्षुदान दिलो जय जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलसे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
दिव्य ज्ञानी प्रकाशितो
प्रेमा भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
वेदे गाय जहाँ चरितो श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आधमा जनारा बंधु लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना हा हा प्रभु कोरो दोया देहो मोरो पादा छाया ए बेजास गुशुक त्रिभुवाना श्रीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावाना जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा जय गुरुदेवा नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्ण हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे नित्य गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल नित्य गौर हरि बोल
जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजक श्री श्रीमद His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Shri Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sankund Radha Kundagiri Govardhana Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Ganga Maya ki jai, Jamuna Maya ki jai, Samaveda Bhaktavinda ki jai. Itai Gaur Primana. All glories to Samudra, all glories to Samudra, all glories to Samudra, all glories to Shikuru and Shikaranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Patita Pavana ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutali Sukadeva. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru.
The lotus feet of our spiritual master on the only way by which we can attain pure devotional service. I bow to his lotus feet with great awe and reverence. By his grace, one has crossed the ocean of material suffering and obtained the mercy of Krishna. My only wish is to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus mouth. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From his ecstatic prema emanates by him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and the Lord and master of the devotees. O Loknath Goswami, O Master, be merciful unto me. Give me the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread all over the three worlds. Lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada.